Hi, hello, I'm John Blake and I'll be your teacher for this course, Intermediate English 3. No doubt you've already done Intermediate English 1 and 2, so you probably know how the class works. Today's class is the first one, Class 1, and we're going to look at research papers and how to read them. Okay, so what is a research paper? Obviously, it's about research, and paper here doesn't mean pieces of paper, it means an article, a research article. So a research paper really means a research article. In computer science, these are often quite short, maybe 4, 5, or could be up to 8 pages. Your graduation thesis will be approximately 6 pages. So let's look at a research paper. Here you can see on the right hand side in a very small font we have an example of a research paper, but let's look what it really does. First, it's a written text, okay, lots of words that explain something that the researchers have found, discovered or learned. When people write research papers, they use formal language and it's very academic. So what that means is they avoid informal words, slang words and contractions and things like that. Commonly, they compare older information in other research to the new information that they found. It's kind of like standing on the shoulders of giants. You build on the work that other people have done and then you present what you've contributed to the research area. So what's the purpose? Well, the purpose of a research paper is to share new information. If you're writing a research paper with no new information, it's actually not research. It's just a paper describing somebody else's work. Okay, so let's imagine you want to find a research paper. Where do you go? Sure, you can walk to the library and in the University of ISU you'll be able to find many papers. Most people, however, don't do that. In fact, almost always I just go directly to Google Scholar. But let's see what they are. So research papers are published in journals. Previously these were always printed, but nowadays almost all of them have an online version. A journal is like a magazine, but it's a little bit different because it's refereed, which means that people check the quality of the articles. They're published regularly, sometimes once a year, 4 times a year, and maybe even every month. Occasionally, some of the top journals published every week. Journals tend to have research papers on very similar topics. So if you look at an artificial intelligence journal, all the papers will of course be about artificial intelligence. If you look at a computer science journal, well, that's much more broad because it also includes artificial intelligence. So we have some journals which are very specific and some which are more broad. Okay, so let's think about the online research papers. Often you can download these as PDF files, but sometimes you read them online as HTML documents. Here's an example from the journal SN Computer Science. So let's look at the different parts. At the top you have the journal title. Underneath that, it describes the purpose of the journal. This is mainly to encourage potential authors to submit their work to this particular journal. Then we see the name of the editor-in-chief, Errol Gelembe, perhaps. This person is the one who's responsible for everything within the journal. So often you have teams of editors because it's a lot of work. So if we're going to look at a research article in the field of computer science, it's probably a good idea to narrow it down. So which particular area of computer science are you interested in? Here on the right, you can see a list of topics: artificial intelligence, pattern recognition, quantum computing, right the way down to the bottom, to computer and network security. It's probably a good idea to think about the topic that you're interested in for a number of reasons, and one being you're going to have to choose a lab very soon. So if you know the topic you're interested in, it might help you choose the lab. When you check a journal issue, each issue has a number of papers. Occasionally they only have one or two, but in computer science it tends to have a good number. So in this particular example, which is volume 1, that means in the first year, issue 6, which means it's the 6th magazine issued in that year. In this particular one, there are 36 research articles. So to get access to an article, often you need to pay money, or in our case, the University of Aizu pays a subscription. Because we're a computer science university, the University of Aizu only subscribes to computer science research articles. So if you want to read something on medicine or biology, you probably don't have access. However, there are a good number of journals that are free and allow anybody to read the articles. Okay, so how do we find these journals? As I mentioned before, Google Scholar. Just type the words Google Scholar in Google and you'll get this page. So from here, you really just want to type what you want to find. It just functions like a typical search engine. However, it doesn't search all the internet. It only searches documents that Google Scholar believes are research articles. So here are the results for a search. The search was why students don't choose computer science. And we can see on this page there are 4 links to PDF documents. This is good news because when you see a link here, it means you have access to the document without paying any money. So let's think about the research paper itself. Each paper is divided into different parts. Now, here we have a list of 8 parts of a research paper. However, each research paper doesn't always use the same terms. In computer science, often they don't use words like introduction, methods, and results. They use other words. However, they still describe the same concepts. Let's look at each part. The title. Well, this is the thing to attract attention to the document, and it names the topic of research. The abstract is a short summary of the whole research article. It would seem like a good idea to read this. However, the problem is abstracts are written in a very difficult to understand way. Not on purpose, just because they're so short, they tend to use a lot of complex grammar and technical words. Introduction is much easier to read, and this shows why there's the need for this particular research. In the method, they explain how the research was done, and in the results, they show what they've learned, found, or made. And the discussion section, they try to relate this to other aspects, maybe other research or the world at large, and they try to explain what the results of the research mean. In a conclusion, this is where they try to relate the research to a wider circumstance and try to kind of relate it to other areas. The references, this is a list of all the sources that the authors used when making the research paper. So here's one example of a research paper title: Why students with an apparent attitude for computer science don't choose to major in computer science. A key point here is that this is not a sentence. It's actually a big noun phrase. Let's focus on some more parts of the research article. Here's the abstract. It's color-coded to make it easier to understand. So the first part, the yellowy orangey color, describes the problem. The pinky color part describes the method of how they did it, and the greenish color part describes the results. So here, only by reading a few sentences, you can get a good overview of what the whole research article is about. So, a lot of people read the abstract and then go directly to the conclusion to see, is it really worth reading the middle of the paper? So let's do the same thing. Check the first sentence in the conclusion. Is it worth reading this paper? Survey results provided evidence to support the belief that students chose not to major in CS because they have an incorrect or no perception of the field. Okay, well that makes sense. So maybe now I want to read the whole paper. Sometimes you find that the conclusion shows their research was produced a negative result, and then maybe it's not worth reading the paper. Okay, so now you perhaps have a basic understanding of what a research article is. Answer each of these 7 questions, and then of course check to see whether your answer is the same as was written. Okay, so here you can check whether your answers were the same as these. Simply read the answers to the questions, and if yours is different, go back again, look over this presentation and see what the problem was. If you're not sure, of course, feel free to ask a question in the forum, or if you actually see me in person, ask me directly. Thank you.